Hi everybody. I was recently interviewed by CCX Media about the continued tragedies and the mass shootings that continue to happen in our country, and how on earth are we supposed to talk to our children, young and even our older children, about what is happening in our world and how they think about these things that they see all over social media. They see them in the newspaper, they see them on TV, they hear it in the background, and their friends might be talking about it. So what do? This is not an easy thing. I think we are becoming a little bit desensitized to this in the news because there's one after the next after the next. And we start to detach, especially if it doesn't impact you directly, your friends, your family, people you know. We start to detach a little bit, I think, to self-preserve. There's only so much we can do to handle all the stress that comes in to our world every day, especially when it's in regards to safety. And some of the things that I wanted to talk about was, how do parents or teachers or educators talk to kids about such tragedies? And I know there's a lot out there in Google land about this, and hopefully a lot of people are talking about it on the news, so that we can start to help families deal with this. And I think the biggest thing overall as us as adults, as parents, is that we need to be mindful of how we're feeling. So when you hear about it and you get an alert on your phone, or you hear about it on the TV, or the TV is playing in the background and there comes an alert, and your children are playing in the room and they hear it, they don't really know what's happening, but they can watch you and they can see what you're saying, what you're feeling, how you react. And it's not that we want people to become stoic and not have emotions, but it's to, if you have emotions, to just talk about it age appropriately. If they're watching you experience learning about this for the first time. As kids become a little bit older, I think it's certainly important to ask them, what have you heard today in the news? How was your day? What was good? What made you happy? Who did you play with? What did you eat? And is there anything that made you sad? Is there anything that made you worried? Open-ended questions can be really, really helpful for older kids and even teenagers or college-age students to be able to open the conversation up and see what they have to say. Maybe they haven't heard of anything. Depending on the age, you can certainly leave it at that. Turn off the TV. Don't have that on for the younger kids. The older kids might really want to talk about it, about how they're feeling. But they don't always come to you saying, I just heard this in the news and this is terrible and I'm feeling really sad and scared. Help me. That would be ideal, if kids could do that, but they don't. They usually just kind of take it in and absorb it, and it might come out in anger, it might come out in irritability or sadness. And it's our responsibility to maybe bring it up and see if there's something they want to talk about. And if they don't, that's okay. Maybe tomorrow or the next day or the next day, they'll come to you and say, you know what, there's something going on and I don't get it. I don't understand it. If we break it down, kids that are very young, like under 6, if we can keep the TV off and the radio off in the car as much as you can when it at least comes to these kinds of things, they have a hard time understanding what this is all about. But it's still, if it's something that you want to ask or something that they have heard, you can still say something very simple, very concrete, something like, there are bad people or tricky people, however you want to put it, in the world that do bad things. And there's also a lot of really good people and heroes that save the day. They're very used to seeing that in their cartoons. And then kind of focus on, how do we in our own lives be a hero? What do we do to help people, and police officers and things like that? Nurses, teachers, friends, how do we help people? Really just kind of keeping it simple as, there's bad people that do bad things, and there's good people that do good things. Let's focus on the people who do good things, and certainly be able to say that you love them and that you're protecting them from any kind of harm as much as possible. And so keeping it very simple. As kids age, they're going to have maybe more questions and more confusion around it. And that's a great place to ask questions, have them open up if they would like to about what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're hearing, so that allows you to kind of correct any misconceptions they might have heard at school or through other kids. And it's an avenue to start talking about it. How are we safe? And that the world generally is a safe place. We're just bombarded with a lot of news very quickly, and unfortunately in the last many years, these types of gun violence and mass shootings have become just too rampant. And I'm hoping that there's a lot that we can do at lots of levels in our society to curb this from continuing, and getting kids involved, saying, what would you like to do? Giving them some autonomy and some independence, feeling a little more in control. Should we make a care package and send it to that area? Should we make a lemonade stand and collect money? There's so many things that kids can do to feel powerful in situations where it feels very powerless. Same with adults and parents. It can be really hard for us to figure out what are we supposed to do with this, and it makes it hard to feel like we can send our kids anywhere or go anywhere, or we start to avoid places. And I think being very mindful that we want to continue our routines and continue our day, especially in our kids' lives, so that it doesn't get disrupted, and hopefully that anxiety doesn't spin out of control where we start to have a lot of fear that feels very difficult to manage. And I think just talking about the precautions that we do have in place, the safety measures that we do have, kind of like, today there was a lot of hail in Minnesota. So we have alerts on our phones that there's hail, and it says to take cover. So we can't really control the weather, but we can control what we do and how we respond. And we have safety measures in place in our schools and in our hospitals, if we lose power or something happens. So I think just kind of teaching and reminding that we have a lot of these safety measures in place, because things do happen. Not everything is going to be 100% smooth in our life, and it's important that we are mindful of this and start talking about it and teaching coping skills, not to have kids worry excessively about it. We want to try to absorb some of that worry for them, but we also need to be realistic and start teaching them young that there are ways to plan and prepare. There are ways to cope if things do happen, and take back some control so that we don't get lost in some of the fear and worry. So please don't forget your college-age students or kids. They're mini adults, I'd like to say. Their brains are still growing, and they still are going to need you to check in on them. Whether you're, a teacher or a parent, a grandparent, an aunt or uncle, ask them how they're doing with this. What are they reading? What do they want to talk about? Let them know how you feel. Let them know what you're doing to cope. Modeling behaviors is super important for kids of all ages. But definitely, for those young adults that are away at school, how are they feeling being at a concert or at a crowd, or, how are they feeling about that? And just kind of giving them space to vent and talk about things, and talk about how you cope as an adult with some of these things that we're dealing with in our communities and our societies, and these tragedies that feel very senseless and have no meaning and really have no room in a world as progressive as we are today. It feels very, very difficult to manage. So finding ways to cope yourself is really, really important. And if you feel like you're having trouble coping yourself, if you feel like your kids are starting to get really fearful of things and going out and just can't stop thinking about it, or their behaviors are showing that they're having a hard time, that's a good time to seek help. Find a therapist, a licensed clinician, talk to your medical provider, talk to the school counselors and social workers. They're there for you and your families. So if you need anything from us, feel free to reach out. Synergy eTherapy, and we have providers and clinicians in a lot of different states to help anybody reach this access of care that everybody deserves. So phone number is 612-642-1355, and you can email info@synergyetherapy.com.